I was just trying to feed my son. I never expected what came next. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share this with someone who believes in the power of kindness. The diner buzzed with the usual noise of clinking silverware and low conversations. Chris sat at a corner booth, his back hunched slightly as he tried to feed his 5-year-old son, Jake. The boy was playing with a spoon, giggling as he made a tiny mess with ketchup on his plate. It had been a long week, longer than most, and this little treat of fries and burgers was all Chris could manage with what was left in his wallet. Chris was a single father, not by choice. 2 years ago, his wife, Emily, had passed away in a car accident on her way home from a late shift. Since then, everything changed. The dreams they had built together, buying a house, taking Jake to Disneyland, growing old side by side, vanished in a single, cruel instant. Chris had to sell their house, move into a one-bedroom apartment, and juggle 2 part-time jobs to keep food on the table. Still, he smiled at Jake. Always for Jake. As he wiped his son's face clean, the waitress came by with the check. He stared at it for a moment, calculating if he had enough left for the bus ride home. Probably not. Maybe they could walk. It wasn't far. Chris gathered the fries Jake hadn't eaten and wrapped them in a napkin. "We'll take the rest for later, buddy." That's when he heard it. "May we have your leftovers?" The voice was small. Polite. It came from behind him. Chris turned and froze. 2 children, maybe 8 or 9 years old, stood side by side near the door. A girl and a boy. Dirty clothes. Torn sneakers. Faces smeared with dust. And eyes, those eyes. They weren't just hungry, they were empty. Tired in a way no child should ever look. Chris couldn't speak. Behind them stood a woman, tall, thin, shoulders drawn in like she was trying to disappear. Her face was flushed with shame, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. She stepped forward quickly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "They shouldn't have asked." "It's okay," Chris said, finding his voice. His heart twisted. He looked at Jake, then back at the kids. Are you hungry?" The woman nodded slowly, unable to meet his gaze. Chris looked down at the napkin in his hands. Cold fries. Leftovers. What he had intended to save for later. He looked at his son again, remembering how Jake had cried last month when the fridge was empty and there was no dinner. How Chris had pretended to already have eaten, just so Jake could fill his belly. Something inside him shifted. "Come sit," Chris said, motioning to the booth. "Please." The woman hesitated. "We don't want to." "You're not bothering us," he said firmly. "I insist." They sat. Chris called the waitress over and asked for 2 more kids' meals. The woman's lips trembled. "You don't have to." "I know," Chris said, "but I want to." As the food came and the children ate, slowly at first, like they weren't sure it was real, Chris learned their story. Her name was Marissa. She'd fled an abusive marriage 6 months ago with nothing but a suitcase and her 2 kids. They'd been living out of a car, taking showers at a shelter when possible, and scraping by on food banks and kindness from strangers. Chris listened quietly, feeling a bond forming in the silence between her words. Pain recognized pain. He saw himself in her. The same desperation. The same exhaustion. But also, like him, the same fierce love for her children. As they finished the meal, Jake handed one of his chicken nuggets to the little girl and said, "You can have it. I already had one before." Marissa's eyes welled up. She covered her mouth with her hand and turned away. Chris put a hand on her shoulder. "It gets better," he said softly. "I don't know how. But it does." That night, they exchanged phone numbers. Not out of charity. Out of understanding. In the weeks that followed, Chris helped Marissa find a spot in a family shelter closer to his neighborhood. He called in a favor at one of his jobs to help her get part-time hours. She, in return, babysat Jake when he had a shift and no one else to watch him. Slowly, they began rebuilding their lives. Together. One evening, as the 4 of them sat on the grass outside Chris's apartment, sharing a homemade meal, watching Jake and the kids chase fireflies, Marissa looked at him and said, "I never thought someone would help me again." Chris smiled. "I thought the same thing once. Turns out, the world still has good people in it. Sometimes, they're just tired. Or broke. Or hiding behind pain." She reached out and held his hand. In that moment, under a sky that seemed a little brighter than usual, Chris realized something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not just for himself, but for Jake, for Marissa, for her kids. For tomorrow. It had all started with a simple question. May we have your leftovers? But it ended with so much more: second chances, new beginnings, and hearts healing together. If you believe in the power of compassion, please like this video and subscribe. You never know how far one small act of kindness can go, or how it might just save tea.